Hello, and welcome to another How to OU at USU. Today, we will be looking at how to set up a iframe component for a YouTube video. So, how to embed a YouTube video on your webpage within OU campus at Utah State University. This will go over how to use Bootstrap 4, version 4, to set up the embed, and then we'll also look at how to change the size of the video but still keep the video mobile responsive and looking good in all different sizes of devices. Cool. Let's begin. So as you can see, I've already gone into OU campus and created this page that we'll use. So I'll go ahead and edit that, and I'll check the file out, and I'll go into edit. And first thing I'll do, I'll go ahead and turn on show blocks so I can see where I'm at. I'm in the H1 here. I'll go to the very bottom of the page, try and get to the very end, and I will insert another snippet. This next snippet will start with one column, and we'll start by just setting up the thing. So we can see that it just nested that snippet within this other snippet, and we can tell that because it looks a little off right. That's okay. We'll go into source code, and we will see that that just looks obnoxious and scary, right? So we don't want to deal with that. So we'll start by going into the source code, and we'll add an extra paragraph tag. We'll call it drop zone. Right, so we have our closing paragraph tag, our opening paragraph tag, and our content for that tag. That just gives us a place to put our cursor, so we can delete that. We'll get rid of the paragraph tag itself. Nope, we'll keep the paragraph tag. I lied. Then we'll go into our snippets, and we'll add a one column just to start with. And there we go. So we can see that that takes up the full 12 columns that are available to us in Bootstrap. We'll get rid of that header completely. We don't need that. We'll very carefully get rid of the placeholder paragraph. And let's go ahead and start by adding our YouTube video. So the way we'll do that, we'll go to our iframe component. Iframe embed, there we go. And then we'll go to our YouTube video. This is just one of the other videos that I have made. We'll go ahead and right click on that and copy the embed code. That'll give us our nice iframe. But it's not completely nice just yet, because if we try to use this as is, here, let's actually go ahead and do it. We'll see right away that it's not going to be mobile responsive. And let's get rid of that extra period in that first part of the paragraph that we kept to help us make sure the blocks stayed the way they needed to. Cool. So it looks kind of fine, right? Let's go ahead and publish it. Normally you submit it for approval. Also, normally this wouldn't publish because it's missing a title and meta description, all that stuff. We'll come over to the page, refresh. Yeah, it showed up. Looks fine. What's wrong with it? Well, let's check it out on a mobile device. So I just opened the dev tools. I did that by pushing Control-Shift-I. You can do that for yourself. Or you can just pull it up on your phone, tablet, or any other smaller device, and you can see right away it breaks the page. It breaks the page by creating all this extra space that's just not necessary. Instead of shrinking the video down and making it look good within the page, within the content of the header and footer, it broke the page and made it way bigger, and it just gets worse as you go to smaller devices. So how do we fix that? We fix that using Bootstrap. So this is quite a bit wider video. Most videos are not going to be that size at all, right? Most are going to be either 4:3 or 16:9. We'll use 16:9 because that's closest. Actually, technically 21:9 might be closer for this one, but for example, we'll use that. We'll go into edit, and we'll change our iframe. So we're just going to make a little bit of space, and then we're going to paste in the code that I just copied from the Get Bootstrap version 4 documentation. I don't need this thing that explains what aspect ratio we're using. I just need the actual div right here with its class that gives it some CSS, that does some cool behind the scenes magic, and that iframe. All right, and then we'll go down to the iframe that I got from YouTube, And I can delete this width attribute right off the bat. I don't need that. I don't need that. I don't need the height attribute or its value. Source, this src source, that attribute, I do need its value, which is equal to this URL right here. So we just go from the double quotes to the next set of double quotes. I do need that. I need the double quotes too, so I'll keep that. Frame border, you technically don't need, but it doesn't hurt. It doesn't do anything. Allow. Now, some of these are useful, some aren't. Accelerometer, I can't even say that word. I don't know what that does. Autoplay is if you wanted it to play the moment that users got to your page. I don't really want that for this one, so I'm actually going to delete that. I don't need that. Clipboard, right? So if I wanted people to be able to right click and then do what I just did on YouTube, that will allow that. I don't really care either way for that. In fact, I don't really care for most of these, except for this last attribute right here. This allow full screen, I do want that. So I'm going to cut that. I'm going to put it right after my source attribute. And then I'm going to copy it again with that source attribute, because that's all I need. And then I'll delete this other garbage because I don't need that crap. All right, and then we'll go into the actual iframe itself. I do want to keep that class attribute and its value because I need that, but I don't want this src to point to ... That's no good. That's not useful. I want it to point to the YouTube video src, and then this allow full screen attribute just lets users make it full screen while on your web page. I think that's useful. I like that, so I'll keep that. I'll save that. We'll give that a preview. And it looks basically the exact same, right? Because it's taking up everything and stuff. But let's see what happens when I publish. So I publish, and on a desktop computer, yeah, it looks the exact same as it did. But once we go to a smaller device, we can see right away that the video has now shrunk to stay within the confines of the web page. So that way the top nav and header looks good, and so does this footer. Let's go to a smaller device. Oh, same thing. So now the video is mobile responsive. It responds to the size of device, so that way it'll look good instead of stretching the page. Cool, cool. That's exactly what we wanted. So that's how to create the actual video using, good old YouTube to get our embed code, and then also Bootstrap 4 to make it look good on all devices. But this still is a little big, right? This is a little bit too big. I don't want to yell this video at users when they first get to this webpage, so we're going to go ahead and change the size. Now we just made it mobile responsive, and we don't want to break that mobile responsiveness, right? We don't want to have to redo that every single time. So what can we do to change the size of the video but still keep it looking good on as many devices as possible? We're going to do that by going into the source code, just these angle bracket looking things, and right away we can find our component. It's this weird scary looking code. As long as we don't touch that or mess with that, it'll work, and so we'll just not mess with that. What we do want to mess with though is this right here. So we see this call 12. That means take up 12 of the columns, and in Bootstrap, the grid system that Bootstrap uses has 12 columns. So I can sit here and change that value 12, and that will shrink the size of the video. So here, let's actually go ahead and try that. Let's make it 6. All right. Now I'm going to save that. We'll give it a preview. And cool. We can see that right away it shrunk the video down. So now it only takes up 6 or half of the columns that it would have normally taken up. And we can publish that. And let's have a look. Cool, so now it takes up only 6 of those columns. That's awesome. But what happens when we go back to a smaller mobile device? Oh shoot, that's not quite what we want, right? On a small device, it also only takes up 6 of those columns, which especially when you get to like a cell phone, that starts looking really stupid because that's itty bitty tiny, and we don't want that. We do not want that. So we got to change it a little bit differently. So let's go back into the source code. So how do we do that? Well, we use the Bootstrap grid system. So if we look up grid for grid system in Bootstrap, and remember we're using version 4, so don't be confused and use the newest version of Bootstrap. The newest version is version 5. We're using version 4. you can see all of the documentation on how this all works. And this is literally verbatim how it works on our site as well. So if we get down to it, we can see that we can specify the sizes of device that we want it to take up so many columns. So when we said col6, we said on all devices, take up 6 of the 12 columns. So let's change that back to 12. So that way when we get down to really small devices, it'll take up all 12. And then we want to set up something that'll, on smaller devices, or medium, let's start with medium-sized devices. So we'll use MD. We want it to take up 6 columns on medium-sized devices. Does that make the sense? So this says take up all 12 columns, but then as soon as the viewport, as soon as the size of the screen is big enough, it'll trigger this code and run it instead, which is just some CSS magic we get from Bootstrap, nothing to worry about. And it'll say take up only 6 of the 12 columns. So we'll save that. And cool. So it looks the exact same here, which we expect because it's only taking up 6 of the columns because it's on a big enough size screen. But if we go back to the page after I just published it, refresh, open up our dev tools, and we can see, okay, on a cell phone, it takes up all 12 columns. And once we get to about a tablet or so, then it's going back to that half and half. Now let's say we want it to take up maybe 8 on a tablet, 8 of those 12 columns, and only 6 on a desktop computer or something really big, right? So how will we do that? Well, we'll go back into our source code and we'll say, well, okay, on tablets and iPads, those sorts of small laptops, we want it to take up 8. So let's go ahead and set that. And then we'll add another CSS class from Bootstrap, which we can look up somewhere on this page. So you're more than welcome to look that up. But it's col_lg6. And that'll say, hey, on a medium-sized device, take up 8 of the columns. On the smallest size of device, take up all 12. But on a larger device, a big device, take up only 6. And we'll save that and save it. And again, it won't look like anything's changed here because it kind of hasn't, right? Because it's a super large device, right? But if we refresh and then we open up our dev tools again, we can see that, hey, on the tablet now, or iPad, whatever, it's taking up 8 of those 12 columns. So it's a little bit bigger than half. And we can go and see it takes up all of them. And once we get to, about a laptop or even like a desktop size monitor, well, bigger laptop. Yeah, bigger laptop. It starts to go half and half. And you can sit there and tweak it however you want. And by doing it this way, you preserve that mobile responsiveness. So that way the video can look good no matter what size of device you're on, without breaking the page. And you can get it to have the right size that you want for whatever size of device you're working on. Now let's say we also wanted to center this video. So we know it takes up 12 columns, so how could we go ahead and get that centered? Well, we could go ahead and copy this initial div, opening div, and then we'll set up a closing div. And what that'll do is it'll do the exact same thing as what we copied it is doing. So on the smallest size of device, it'll take up all 12 columns. On a medium-sized device, it'll take up 8, and on a large device, it'll take up 6. So what that'll do on this desktop is it'll push that video over by 6 of the columns. So it'll end up being right aligned instead of on the left. So let's check that out real quick. And we can kind of see that there, but we can definitely see that in the preview. So we're getting somewhere. That's close, right? So then we'll go back in. What if we just cut that LG6 in half and made that 3, right? So now we have this div, and right now we're not worrying about tablets or extra small devices. We're just trying to get it to be centered on a large device. This is one way we could do that. And we'll say take up 3 of the columns, then take up 6. And then technically there's 3 other ones we could use over here. They're just not getting used. That does work, but there's a better way that involves using even less code, which is always good. So how can we do that? Well, we'll delete what we just created, and we're going to use what's known in Bootstrap as an offset class, which is also on this page with its documentation. We'll just look for offset, and we can see we have these offset classes that allow us to offset columns, again, based on the size of device, either SM for small, MD for medium, LG for large, and XL for extra large. So let's see. Let's set it up so that way on a medium-sized device, let's offset on medium devices. So the video is going to take up 8 columns, and we know there's 12 total. So that means that 12 minus 8, that's 4, right? We want it to be centered. So if I cut that 4 in half and use it 2, that'll magically make it be centered. So it'll have 2 columns on the left, the 8-column video, and then 2 extra columns on the right that just aren't getting used. And that's for medium-sized devices, right? Good. So that looks good on tablets, but that doesn't look good on large devices like desktops and stuff. So how do we do that? Well, same idea. We'll use offset LG. This time the video is going to be 6, right? So, well, 6 is half of 12. And if I take half of 6, then I get a 3. And then what that does is say, hey, offset by 3 columns on the left, take up 6 columns for the actual content of this video. And then there's 3 extra columns that just aren't getting used. And we'll save that. And we'll save the page. And cool. So it takes up 6 of the columns. Looks good. Offsets by 3. There's 3 extra here because we're on a desktop. Let's publish that real quick. And we'll go to the actual page, refresh, and look at it. Okay, looks good on a desktop. Now let's go ahead and look at a tablet. Cool. So let's see. Let's go to a super small device. Okay, so on the smallest device, we didn't change anything. It just takes up all 12 of the columns, which is great. And once we get to a tablet, we can see it's still centered, which means that, okay, yeah, we have 2 columns over here and 2 over here that just aren't getting used. And then the video is taking up 8, which is good. That's what we want. And then when we get to a large device, same thing. It's still nice and centered, but it's just taking up 6 of the 12 columns. And now it has 3 on the left and 3 on the right. The 3 on the left are what we offset by. The 3 on the right just aren't being really used or acknowledged. So cool. That's how to kind of size iframes and iframe components, so that way they're still mobile responsive within OU campus here at Utah State University. So hopefully that's helpful. A little bit longer video. Sorry about that. Hopefully it's useful though. So thanks and bye.